This is a project for the Fantasy Fighting Game Design. This video is the first video of a two-part series where we are going to be designing and implementing a fantasy fighting game. For this exercise, I was supposed to create a UML and flowchart diagram to model the logic of the game. Let me run you through my UML diagram first. The UML begins with a player class to simulate the two players that will fight in the arena. This player class consists of a name, strength, health, and inventory and gold. Because the player will constantly be losing and gaining health and strength, the player class consists of not only its default strength and health, but also attributes to track the strength and health of the player inside of the battle. We have an inventory where the player will buy equipment and have it stored inside. However, inside of the arena, the player will only be allowed to pick 3 of the many items inside his inventory to use for a battle. Because of this, I added an active fight inventory to model this 3-slot bar where the player can choose his equipment from. We finally have an attribute, Games Won, to keep track of the amount of games won for the player. For its functions, it has a default constructor, a constructor receiving its name, strength, health, and gold, getters and setters for both the default and active attributes, and functions to view the player's inventory and battle inventory. It also has a view active fight stats, where the active fight attributes will be displayed neatly at each player's turn. To allow the player to choose the 3 items from his inventory to his battle bar, it contains the get inventory item. Going to the arena class real quick, we have 2 players as attributes and receive them as parameters for our parameter constructor. The arena also has a fight function where the fighting will be done. More implementation of the fighting will be done later in the video. Back to the player class, the player contains a buy item function to be able to go to the store at will and buy items. This brings us to the store class. It contains a vector of items to represent all the equipment inside. The store will have a show inventory function to display all equipment of the store when buying. It also has a function named sell item, which will be called every time the buy item function inside of the player class is called. The store is composed of the class item, as it has a vector made out of pointers to it. The item is an abstract class consisting of many virtual functions. It first consists of a name attribute set to a visibility of protected, for its derived classes will have access to it while outside classes will not. The class also contains an identifier and a total items attribute set to private. The 2 attributes will work together to set identifiers, numbered 1 to how many items are created, to allow the user to enter their identifier to access them, rather than their specific name. The item class has 3 derived classes, weapon, armor, and potion, in which each will have their own derived classes, or types of weapon, armor, and potions. Each of the derived classes of item contain a unique attribute. The weapon will have strength, while the armor will have health, and the potion will have a gain. Okay, that was the UML. Now let's move on to the flowchart. We start at start. Yeah. Okay, cool. We begin by dynamically creating 2 player objects, a store and an arena with 2 players. Note that we need to create the 2 players with their corresponding initial attributes for name, strength, and health, even though not explicitly stated here. Each contain their own constructor. The store will fill the inventory of the store with 21 items across 3 levels of power. The constructor of the arena will assign the 2 players received to their own attributes. That's simple. We then call the main menu function. The main menu shows 4 options: player, store, arena, and exit. Let's go through them one by one. The first one, player, calls the player menu function that gives 5 additional options to the user. The first is save game, where the player will have the option to export all game data into a TXT file. The load game option will allow the user to import the data from the file to continue playing their game. The show inventory option will simply display their inventory of items, and their 4th option, the show stats, will show the attributes of the player. Finally, the 5th option, return to main menu, will go back to the main menu. The second option, the store, will allow the player to buy items from the store inventory and put them to their player inventory. This is done by having a function orchestrating this process, in this case goToStore. This function receives the store object and 2 players. At this function, the store will show its inventory and prompt the user to enter a certain ID to buy an item. We read the user's answer and will buy the item with the corresponding ID or identifier. The buyItem function receives the store object and the ID of the item to buy. The function calls the selItem function, where it finds the item with the matching identifier, removes from the vector of items from the store, and returns the item. If it was not found, then it simply returns a null pointer. Back on buyItem function, the function adds the item returned by the selItem function to the inventory of the player. Once the function returns, we repeat the process for player 2. And finally, we come to the arena option, which takes the players to fight. Over at the function go to fight, we first show the inventory of the first player and allow the player to choose a maximum of 3 items for the fight. We have a for loop where for each iteration, the user will enter an ID, which will match the corresponding identifier from their inventory. We give the player the choice to skip choosing an item for a slot by allowing them to enter a 0. We repeat this for the player 2. When they have chosen their fight inventory, now it is time for them to fight. During the fight, each player chooses a skill, which is one of the items of their fight inventory, and then attack each other. This repeats until any of their healths reach 0 or below. In this video, I covered my entire flowchart at an abstract level, so I did not include every single detail. Thank you for watching.